All right. So here we are again. We're doing, this is Jeff and Daniel, and we are doing part two of our conversation on, well, would you like to title it for us?
Oh, I'm not I think we'll pick the title out of what just comes up in this.
Okay.
We'll definitely be doing the bulk of Cardano's life and works today.
Okay.
Um, and then I would like to move on to some specific topics about Cardano and medicine. I'd like to touch on his astrology, and
Yeah.
so we can work. Sometimes I've left out something important in those aspects to keep something for us to talk about in those.
Yeah.
I think the main areas would be mathematics, astrology, and medicine is major work, and philosophy, I guess, too.
Yeah. Just as a side question, when were you doing your primary reading on him? I know right now you're not. You've got a whole other thing you're reading. Like, when was this happening? Years
It was
ago?
a Yeah, it was a few years ago, but it wasn't more like I was just it was more like I was taking in a book once in a while on him.
Mm.
I think it definitely started. Well, I guess, I mean, I that name, I'd never heard of Cardano before I got into Oxfordianism, and that name was in, Margot Anderson's Shakespeare by
Yeah.
Another Name, specifically talking about, Cardanus Comfort and the poem
Right.
that De Vere had put in there. So I think the first book I got was, that Quantum Astrologer's Handbook, which is just
Mhm.
like a breezy pop science kind of. It's almost like this guy, Michael Brooks, his memoir of being a scientist and looking back at someone who, for his field of quantum physics, had provided something that was useful in their mathematics, and how
Yeah.
would he relate to a Renaissance astrologer. That's kind of as a detailed historical work, it's not the best. He'll get you some of that. And if you ever listen to him into this, don't be offended by that. And he kind of makes being wrong about details part of his book too. I don't know if he did that on purpose as well, but he was working in this quantum indeterminacy kind of a
Yeah.
theme to it. And I guess, he's a popular science writer, a magazine writer.
Yeah.
So I don't want to know if he wanted to spend 20 years doing a detailed, biography of Cardano. So
Right.
it's a good starting place. It kind of reminded me of another book I'd like to get to, called Descartes' Secret Notebook. It's
Ooh.
it's about Descartes and his well, Descartes was in Bohemia at the time when James Stewart Daughter and Frederick V, the ones that the Rosicrucians seem to focus on, when they fell to the Habsburgs,
Oh,
the Winter King and Queen, and Descartes was there, and it's a crazy story. But it's another one told by a popular science writer who went back and looked at Descartes and his involvement in all these things. So I love that book, and we have to do that book sometime. It's very similar to the kind of stories you're hearing in the Cardano. And
yeah.
actually, Cardano was in that. They told the story of Cardano and Tartaglia because this was some of the algebra that Descartes was interesting in advancing,
Okay.
I guess 6 years later. So
Okay. Well,
I guess this start, let's just remind ourselves where we're at.
yeah.
So we're doing like a multi-video series on Cardano, and, as a primarily Oxfordian channel, but, this could be for anyone who's interested in Elizabethan literature and the Shakespeare authorship question and Shakespeare. We've got 3 points that keep coming up, especially for Oxfordians, but, for anyone who's interested in Shakespeare. We've got, um, this translation that De Vere sponsored, by, Thomas Bedingfield, Cardanus Comfort, which was a translation of one of Cardano's works, which De Vere provides a prefatory epistle and a prefatory poem for. And then we've got the relation between that translation of Cardanus Comfort to Hamlet. Is it Hamlet's book? Or if not Hamlet's book, does it have some sort of textual relationship
Mhm.
with Hamlet itself? And then for Oxfordians particularly, we have a lot of people who have done cryptographic work, Alexander Waugh, Lyle Colombo, that use a variation of a type of encryption method that Cardano wrote about. So it's usually called a Cardan grill, and they put it into a Cardan grid. So
Yep.
this is what we're going to be returning to. So we started with that, and we're going to be working let's just get to know Cardano himself.
Mhm.
And it's this method I like to take in working on this whole authorship question. is that, like, I like to take these long digressions, something that just it probably is not gonna solve the authorship question for you. It might provide some little detail that you could work into a case, but, rather than just focusing on that one detail, like, say, who is Cardano? What advances did he make? Looking at the medicine, the astrology, the mathematics, his political life,
Mm.
like, you learn about so many things that when you come back to whoever your candidate is, De Vere, when you come back to Shakespeare, you'll see things that you wouldn't have seen had you not taken that long digression. To me, I'm like, "Oh, I know that guy," or that guy, those sort of details, or something about medicine. You realize that medical issue was a live issue at that time for physicians of that age. It just broadens um your understanding of the whole era. And
Exactly.
yeah, so I like to do that for take a long trip with Girolamo Cardano and come back to Shakespeare. Do a long one through Giordano Bruno, come back to Shakespeare. John Dee, whatever it is, or
Nash.
history, whatever, like historical issues, like religious issues, philosophical
Mhm.
issues. So
Mhm.
we're doing that. And so last time we basically did an overview of Cardano's life and works, and then we started in on his biography. So we've got Cardano. The basic fact is Cardano's parents are he's born out of wedlock, and they're not married they don't marry and they don't live together for the first 24 years of his life, right until Cardano's father's death in the last 2 years of Cardano being a medical student. He was first a student at Pavia, and then they transferred the whole university because of the Italian wars to Padua. So he graduates from the University of Padua. And then, as we said, he barely gets his degree, or well, he gets it on the third vote. The first 2 votes were
Yeah,
no.
right. That's right.
And then he gets it, and then he moves back to his hometown of Milan, and Milan is the place where Cardano lives most of his life. So actually, before we start too, I have 2 corrections of mistakes that I made
Oh,
last
look at you.
and they're so small, no one would care. I'm sure no one would even notice that I said it, never mind made a mistake of it. But sometimes I like I'm listening, I'm like, "Oh, wait, do I really know that?"
You fact checked yourself.
Yeah, but sometimes the only thing I don't like is I listen really carefully to a lot of presentations people make, and sometimes you put one little wrong fact, and perhaps that fact was important to them. You could send someone down a little wild goose chase, which I'd rather not do in the off chance that anyone even noticed, right? So,
What was your mistake?
okay, there's 2 of them. One is about elephants. So remember we had talked about measured words, and one of the kind of playwright mathematicians that was coming at the end of it, of the 4 case studies, was Giambattista della Porta.
Mm.
I mixed up that when Sky Gilbert was doing his last presentation at the 2025 SOF, he talked about this theatrical troupe called the Intronati, who wrote this play called The Deceived, which many people think, or Exfordians think, is the source text for Love's Labour's Lost. It
Mm.
wasn't Della Porta who wrote that, it was Alessandro Piccolomini. But they're
Mm.
both it's interesting, we have to get to both of these guys because they were both Italian polymaths who made advancements in mathematics, scholarship, optics, but they were both playwrights. And, like, I think Della Porta, he wrote, like, 35 plays. So I just wanted to say those are 2 separate figures.
Okay.
Piccolomini coming first and Della Porta coming second, but very related figures. And if we do get to measured words, the 4th case is Della Porta.
Okay.
One
Well, I'm
lady
glad you gave us
Yeah.
Piccolomini because it's fun to say his name.
Yeah, no, it's the funner one to say. Oh, Della Porta is not bad, I guess, either.
Yeah.
And then the second one on elephants, I had said that Cardano thought that elephants could talk. In fact, he said that that's the one thing they couldn't do. But I thought I'd just get you to read this to us on Cardano's love of elephants.
Okay. So this
Oh,
is from a text he wrote.
no, this is from Michael Brooks' book about
Okay.
Cardano. Yeah.
Okay. Where the observations appeal, Jerome eagerly swallows and repeats second or third hand reports. Pliny's observation that an elephant making its way onto a ship demands an oath. This An
Oh,
oath this it will return is one. In fact, Jerome seems to be utterly credulous where elephants are concerned. They are, he tells readers on subtlety, sensitive to pity and revere a king. Moreover, elephants recognize and enforce and oaths and worship the stars and feel distress for themselves. They recognize the driver and extract vengeance from those who have harassed them unfairly, and appear to fall short of humanity, only lacking in speech, since many human beings appear more savage than elephants in their practice and their movements. The bald truth is that Jerome loves elephants, or at least the idea of them. The ideas we love are always subject to a little less scrutiny.
I that I kinda got it wrong, but it was kind of the idea of him being a little bit credulous about elephants.
Okay. I like the fact that they revere kings.
Yeah, and worship the stars. They have their own stellar religion, according to
Yeah.
I've noticed that with many, Renaissance, like, before quite they were getting into, experimental science, they had these natural philosophers that were trying to explain the natural world, and so many I have to read this book, Pliny, that he writes about the natural world, and, that's so many of them just import directly from Pliny. If Pliny said it, it's true, and there's a lot of
Oh,
things in there. Agrippa is another one who's just, "If Pliny said it, it's going in my book," so,
okay.
okay. Okay, so those 2 errors, taken care of. We'll
Okay.
go into Cardano in Milan. So as we said, his father had died 2 years before he graduated. He has to start earning money because he doesn't I think their income drops off fairly precipitously once the
Mm.
father dies. So he starts gambling. That's when and he develops his gambling systems, and this will stay with him for decades at dice, chess, and cards. And he tutors a lot. He those are the kind of his 2 main ways that he, makes extra money. So he gets to Milan, and, of course, he's hoping, "I've got my medical degree. I would like to start up a practice." And so he applies at the College of Physicians in Milan, and this will be a constant source of trouble for the next 20 years. They deny him a license to practice. So and this is because he was born out of wedlock, an illegitimate, child, and they have a strict rule, although I think they had sometimes allowed it to be looked over, but because he was not a legitimate child, he could not practice medicine in the whole I don't think it's even in the city of Milan, there was the whole duchy of Milan or any area that controlled and you have to think of the College of Physicians like a guild or, an association. They control the standards and who's allowed to practice and that sort of thing.
Okay.
So he's denied. He said his mother, uh, because of the hard times, had opened up a brothel. So Cardano had moved home without money for his own place, so he's living in a brothel,
Yes.
and he has no real prospects for, and he's 26 years old at this time. Like, he only started university when he was 19, right? So, he's not quite sure what he's gonna do with his life. And
Sounds like the setup for a modern sitcom.
yeah.
A man moved home, living with his mom, who's now opened a brothel.
Well, I think so okay, so we gotta think too, like, he he has troubles with mental stability throughout his entire life. I think is often prone to someone who's, genius levels at various subjects. And, when he's distressed, it gets worse. The insomnia gets worse.
Mhm,
He's always having ringing in his ears, and sometimes it gets to the point to be like auditory hallucination, that sort of thing.
mhm.
And and then especially in this period, he was having a lot of troubles with sexuality, like psychosexual issues. So
Mm.
in Michael Brooks' biography, he had said that Cardano at this point had had several sexual experiences with both women and men. And he also had said he had an addiction to erotic literature. And so I was starting to think like, what kind of erotic literature could you get addicted to at the time? And this was I had another Oxfordian connection here, because so in that just around that same time, 1524, there was this famous scandalous collection of engravings that came out that was called "I Modi," the ways or the positions. And these were engravings by Giulio Romano. So Giulio Romano is that one artist that Shakespeare mentions in the entire canon in the Winter's Tale. He describes Romano as a sculptor in
Mhm.
relation to the sculpture of Hermione that's in the play. And then Romano, he was the one who designed the tune for Castiglione, um, who wrote the Courtier. And there's a at the top of Castiglione's tomb, there's a statue of the risen Christ that Romano engraved. And I should have mentioned, the Courtier is the other translation that De Vere sponsors in the early 1570s.
Right.
he sponsors a translation from Italian to Latin, so it's not into English. And he provides a Latin preface for that translation as well. And Romano's also he also touches on the Oxfordian case, if you read Anderson's biography closely, that in Shakespeare's poem Lucrece, there's these descriptions of these paintings of the fall of Troy that Lucrece is looking on. Well, in the estate of the Gonzagas in Mantua, Romano had painted these giant, I guess, wall murals of the fall of Troy. Like I think it's like the Sala de Troy. And he also in that same had a painting of Lucretia and Tarquin. So it's possible that those artworks were seen by the person who wrote Shakespeare and incorporated into Lucrece. And Romano was one of these perspective painters, right? Of
Yeah.
the mid late Renaissance. So we're going back a little ways, but this is 1524 Emoti, the ways it had these 16 pictures of sexual positions. And then another interesting thing is that 2 years after that, this poet that I really like to talk about, this Italian poet that Nash apparently wanted to emulate, like the scourge of princes, the most scandalous poet in Europe, Pietro Aretino, he sees these engravings of Romano's, and he decides to write 16 lustful sonnets, 16 lustful sonnets to put with these. And it creates a huge, and they publish it now, the engravings with the sonnets, and they publish these, and it's a massive scandal. Both Romano and Aretino basically have to leave Rome, and that's why he goes to Mantua in the first place. He's out of work in Rome too much.
Oh,
And then
wow.
that's why Aretino, he leaves for Venice and he becomes a Venetian basically. So I
Wow.
don't know if that's the exact book that Cardano was getting obsessed with at the time, but it could have been. It's in the right
Yeah.
framework. And it just kind of shows what kind of literature was
Totally.
around in Italy at the time. And so, and the bigger issue though is that Cardano from the age of 21 to 31, he says he suffers from impotence, and this really bothers him. Like it's something that constantly bothers him, and he thinks, I'll never be able to marry, I'll never to be have children. How can I cure this? And he tries all sorts of medical cures and it doesn't work. So you can see he's got these mental troubles, insomnia, sexual troubles, and he's living in the brothel, suffering from impotence. It's in his face every day.
Like I
Like,
said,
yeah. And status-wise, he's dropped. Like, he was thinking I'd become a great, intellectual physician, mathematician, whatever.
yeah.
Okay, so his break here is that he hears that, okay, he can't practice medicine in Milan, but he hears of this smaller town, Sacco, which is not that far, but it's in the Republic of Venice. Oh, there's work for doctors there. So he travels to Sacco, leaves Milan, and Cardano says these are actually the 5 happiest years of his life. They're like his golden years, because basically I think so. He's this is a constant problem. Cost of living was high in Milan. Like if you lived there, you had to have a good income. So several times he just leaves Milan because he doesn't have enough money to live there.
Mhm.
But the problem for him is he gets to these small towns and there's not enough residents to support a doctor. So,
Mm.
and he does find that in Sacco. So he has enough money saved up from gambling and tutoring to buy a small house there. So he's got a place to live, and he can do a bit of medical work. He's usually you're getting paid in kind if you don't have elite clients. So, people are giving you food, chickens,
Right.
eggs, whatever. He's also got his astrology, so some people do commission predictions and astrological charts from him. And there's a little bit of gambling, but again, gambling is better in the big cities than the small towns. You can only run a hustle so many times in a small town
Right.
before they don't gamble with this guy, right? And you
Right.
need big city and visitors. That's, I think, the best way for a gambler, right?
Yeah.
But he loves it because I guess he's basically got this. He's relieved of the pressure from being in Milan, and I guess in Milan too, he was in his father's footsteps as an illegitimate child of a bizarre, eccentric intellectual. And so in Sacco, he's kind of a big fish in a small pond, and he kind of gets along with everyone. I think he like hangs around at at the city hall. All the higher ups there are not. They like having Cardano around. Where in Milan, he might get shunned. In Sacco, you're a graduate from Pavia? Fantastic,
Oh,
let's talk." That sort of thing. And I
I'm
think
happy
also
for it.
yeah, and also talks a lot about he spends a lot of time outside. He's someone who loves to, I think, walk. He walks constantly, and he likes fishing, and fish are some of the things he loves to eat throughout his life. He mentions in his autobiography his favorite foods and what agrees with him the most. So you can just imagine him, he's partially employed, but he's got a lot of time. He can socialize, be in nature, and he's this is when he starts to write too. He's got so much time.
Mhm.
And so he's not publishing anything at this point, but he's amassing manuscripts, writing on all sorts of subjects and writing continuously, building his style of just like we'd said, he is not a careful literary stylist. He's the kind that try and keep up with your thoughts as best you can, sort of a writer.
Mhm.
Self-admittedly, he's like, I am not a, uh, though I write Latin, I'm not like Cicero. I don't, do careful compositions. I write as fast as I can think. There's one character he meets here. His name was Aldobello Banderini. So this guy is kind of a local businessman. He's an innkeeper. That's probably how he meets Cardano, because Cardano is spending time playing cards at the inn in the evenings. And he's also the captain of the guard in Sacco. They get to be friends, and then their one story is that Cardano tells him, like, I usually can't sleep at night. Is it possible that I could walk the city after curfew? Because after curfew, you weren't supposed to be walking the streets. And he tells his guard, just let Cardano walk. He can't sleep. So, he's got that friendship with him. So,
That's sweet. Wait, just,
yeah.
we don't have to go down this, but,
No,
like,
go ahead.
what would the reasoning be for, people not is it safety concerns? Is it like, uh
I don't exactly my guess would be that, it's like thieves and robbers, they kinda come out they don't have street lights or anything, right? So,
Uh-huh.
you kind of like once it's dark, you have to be inside, and if we catch you
For that, okay.
yeah, you can
Mhm.
stop crime that way. That's what I would guess anyway.
Yeah.
So anyway, so he stays there for 5, 6 years in Saco, and he has this dream before an event that happens, right before he's gonna leave, so I thought you liked his previous dreams. This is the one that, is gonna have a big effect on his life. So if you want to read this for us, it's 2 slides.
Okay, and who's writing this?
This is directly from his autobiography.
Okay. Many years ago, I dwelt in the town of Saco, a gay and happy young man, free from all cares, a mortal in the seats of the high gods, as it were, or better said, in the realms of bliss. At the risk of being irrelevant, I must at this point refer to a dream which is too appropriate to my theme to pass over. On a certain night, I seemed to be in a delightful garden of surpassing charm, gay with flowers and abounding fruits and diverse sorts. A gentle breeze was murmuring. No painter could have depicted anything more lovely, nor could Pulci, the poet, have captured it in song. At the entrance, moreover, of the garden, a gate stood open. A door facing it also appeared, and lo, in my presence stood a girl dressed in shining white. I seemed to embrace her and kiss her, but at the first caress, a gardener immediately appeared and closed the door. Earnestly, I beckoned to plead with him to leave it open, but he would not. Sadly, then, and clinging to the girl, I seemed to stand there, shut out. A few days after I had dreamed this, a house in the town burned, and I was roused up at night to go to the fire. I knew the man who owned the house, one Aldobello Banaderini. He rented the house adjoining my own. Meanwhile, after an interval of some days, I saw from the street a maiden who exactly resembled, in face and fashion of dress, the girl of my dream. From that day on, I ceased merely to love the girl. I was fairly consumed with passion. I knew how much I dared hope for from the reading of my dream. I know I was free from the bonds of impotency. Nothing loath I mar- oh wait, nothing loath I married her, for she was willing to. Her parents were even soliciting the match and making offers of help should any be needed, for help could do much for us then.
So basically, that's one of the famous stories that he says this is the woman he marries, the daughter of the innkeeper, Lucia, Banderini, and he says he saw her in a dream a few nights before he saw her. So, a few nights before that fire, the fire, it burns down Banderini's house, and they rent a house that's exactly beside Cardano's. And that's when Cardano gets a glimpse of Lucia Banderini, who become Lucia Cardano, and he says, "That was the girl that I saw." And so basically, falls madly in love with her, and then his impotency is gone forever at that point. I'm going to come to this again, but he seems to have this thing where a long period of troubles, some sort of like numinous experience, and it's over. But not that his troubles are over. He's on to a new phase with new troubles, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But it happens several times. It's like, it's over and I'm on to something new, you know?
Fascinating.
Rapidly. Okay, so that Aldobello Banderini and his wife are acceptable for Cardano to marry Lucia. They offer him a substantial dowry. They would like for them to stay in Sacco. Like they'll pay them a lot, and it was like, "You have the dowry, and we'll also help you guys out financially beyond that." I think Cardano turned down everything, which seems a little foolish. He decides to leave Sacco. So he
With her.
married, yeah, with her. So with
Yeah.
Lucia Cardano now, they decide to go back to Milan. And I think his thinking is here, okay, I've been away for a few years. I've been practicing medicine. I'm married now. I'm gonna go try the College of Physician again to try and see if they'll take me now. So he travels back to Milan. They don't stay with the mother this time. They rent a small place, and he tries again, and he's denied. Denied for a second time. He's not allowed to practice medicine in Milan. So his wife is pregnant at this time, and then so he starts to practice medicine illegally. So this is something you can get in trouble for if you're caught, and also it's not that lucrative. You're basically treating anyone who couldn't really afford to go to an actual doctor, right?
Right.
Come to the back door of my house, pay what you can, this sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
And his wife suffers her first miscarriage there, and Cardano says, we can't really make it here. So they move to another small town called Gallerate. And this was kind of the small town that his father's branch of the Cardanos, they had their ancestral hometown. So it's basically the same story as Sacco. And this one is within the Duchy of Milan, but I think it was outside the purview of that College of Physicians. So they have to walk there. They have 2 mules to carry their belongings, and it's like a 25-mile walk, something like that. And they arrive there, they have enough, I guess, to rent a small house. And he tries his usual things. The gambling doesn't get him much. There's not a lot of room for a medical practice. But he has some luck here that he meets someone who will be very important to him, an important patron. I'll just pull up a picture of him here. So the patron that he meets is a young aristocratic lawyer named Filippo Arquinto. And this guy will go on to become very important and very famous. He will become eventually the governor of Rome, and then he'll become the Bishop of Milan. And so, he became very high up in the Catholic Church, and I guess he was a patron of the painter Titian, and the painter that's who painted this portrait right here. And he's also eventually going to become a patron of Saint Ignatius of Loyola and the early Jesuit movement. And the works that he will write will be kind of the theology of the Counter Reformation. He'll be important for establishing that. The more famous painting that Titian painted of Arquinto is this one,
Whoa.
which is kind of, it's a little avant-garde. And I know the modern painter, Francis Bacon, based a lot of his paintings on these Titian paintings of Arquinto. And basically the idea here, though, was that when Arquinto was finally appointed Bishop of Milan, I don't know what the political situation was, but he wasn't allowed to live in Milan. He had to rule from a distance. So this is, I guess, partly why he's partially veiled in Titian's painting.
Amazing.
Yeah. Anyways, this was well prior to that. Arquinto has a home in Gallerate, and he meets Cardano, and he's thrilled to have Cardano in Gallerate. This guy who knows mathematics, astrology, astronomy, music, geometry, and Arquinto is working on a book on astrology. He's like, "This is great, Cardano. I could hire you to kind of help me with my book. We'll get this finished, and why don't you and your wife just live in my summer home while you're here?" So their luck improves, and his wife in Colorado had her second miscarriage. So,
Mm.
they keep trying to have a child, and there's been 2 miscarriages at this time. So this is kind of another happy period. They move into Arkinto's summer home, which must have been beautiful, but disaster strikes again. So there's a war that's happening in Tunis between the Ottomans and the Habsburgs, and the Ottomans attack southern Italy, the Papal Estates. So I guess Arkinto is not at the summer house at this time, and he gets called, like, you have to come right away to to supervise military troops in the south of Italy were being attacked by the Ottomans. Arkinto leaves so quickly that he doesn't tell any of his make any legal arrangements for this summer home to be open anymore. So basically, the lawyer comes in the morning and basically with instructions to close down the summer house, lock it up. And he's like, well, they didn't leave any instructions for you guys to be living here, so you'll have to leave. So they overnight he loses once again any
No.
so they have to rent a small hovel again on any money they have. So now she's pregnant for the third time, and they finally have a son. Their first son, Giovanni. And it was interesting too. Apparently, the wife Lucia began to hemorrhage during, I think it was this childbirth, and Cardano was able to save her applying some sort of, what do you call it, a coagulant medicine, right? Which
Wow.
would so this just interested me too, though, because I'm trying to watch for medicine, and a lot of us have this idea that like doctors in the medieval era and the Renaissance were basically worse than useless, like
Mhm,
harmful, you know. But I
mhm.
think that can't be exactly true. I think they were sometimes harmful. Sometimes you'd be better off not going, but sometimes you definitely should see a doctor. Like they
Mhm.
had some tricks up their sleeves. So it's just interesting to hear that they had this a coagulant medicine that could stop a hemorrhage that he would, happen to be able to apply to save his wife. So I just
Yeah.
thought that was a little primer for our medical discussion.
Okay.
Okay, so they've got this son,
What year are
Arkinto.
we now?
So this is so he married her, I think, in 1531.
Okay.
Back, I think, like 1533, 1534,
Okay.
something like that.
Okay.
And they have no prospects in Gallerate, so they're back to Milan for a third time.
Mm.
Even worse now, the mother is not even living there at this moment, and they've been having kind of a dispute over the father's inheritance. So he's got no hopes of getting their funds are drained. They've got no hopes of even getting mother money from the mother, right? So this time they can't even rent an apartment. Him and his wife and their child are sleeping on the streets. And also too, on the walk back from Gallerati to Milan, they didn't even have money for the mules. Cardano has to pull their belongings on a sled, and the wife has to carry the child, and it takes them 3 days, and they have to sleep in the fields. Like
Oh
to,
goodness.
with a newborn infant, right? They arrive in Milan, and you gotta think, this is the guy that's gonna revolutionize algebra in, like, 15 years,
Yeah,
Like,
he writes
and
a book on comfort.
we're gonna try and end that will influence Shakespeare. I think we're gonna end with him being called to Scotland to heal their archbishop, but at this moment, they're sleeping in fields. He gets to Milan, and they're sleeping on the streets begging for food. He's got nothing.
Ah,
And again, as we'd said, mental troubles begin to increase the more he's stressed.
yeah.
So, that's, like, late fall. By winter, he gets themselves into a workhouse. So I tried to figure out what these workhouses were, and they were basically like civic charity institutions, religious. And the humiliating thing is when you got there, men would be separated. So Cardano would not be living in a little suite with his wife. The men are to one half, the women and children to the
Mhm.
other. And sometimes you'd be sleeping like three to a mattress, it said. And you'd get, like, meager rations of, like, plain food. And then your days would be filled with menial tasks that the city needed. So a lot of it was, like, breaking stone for, street repairs and that kind of thing, right? So Cardano's fairly depressed, right? Okay, so at this workhouse, he meets this ragged old poor magician. you know? And this guy, he's talking to him, and he's talking to Cardano, and he's like, "I can tell you're cursed. You've got a curse on you. I can see it." And he says, for a little bit of money, I think I could, work some magical operations to get this curse off of you. So Cardano's like,
Mhm.
"Why not? Let's do it." So it's like a series of operations that um, this magician does. I think there's one where it's like, the burning of the herbs and like, passing it over the body. And then I think I couldn't quite get the details of this. So Cardano has this ringing in his ears, and the magician is telling him, "This is the screaming of demons. That's the thing. We've got to get these demons out of you." So he's like smashing Cardano with rocks, trying to break the bones of the demons inside. There's that. Okay, but here's the final operation. There's this scummy pond that's near the workhouse. They go out on a moonlit night, him and this magician. And the magician says, "Okay, in this pond, there's the reflection of the moon. You have to dunk your head in the pond in the reflection of the moon, right? And when your head's in there, keep it down there. I'm going to, uh, in, recite some magical incantations." So Cardano does this. He writes it this later, and he says he feels like this curse was being lifted up into the sphere of the moon, and it was gone. That's what he feels like. It was like this curse had been lifted. The ringing in his ears, he said, never came back. Although I don't know if that's true. I think this does come back in the 60s, but he feels like it has anyway. So again, it's like that dream of Lucia. Terrible trouble. All of a sudden he has
Yeah.
this odd experience, and like it's gonna be over. And how does it get over? Filippo Arquento, the man on the screen, he comes back to Colorate from the war. I think this was a brief thing. It wasn't like a years-long war. And he talks to his lawyer and he says, "Where's Cardano?" And he's like, "Well, I kicked them out. I think they left for Milan." And Filippo's like, "What? I didn't want you to do that." So Filippo Filippo travels to Milan, and he finds Cardano, and he's like he's horrified to find this brilliant scholar living in a workhouse, and he's like, "I'll get you out of this." So he sets Lucia and Cardano up in, regular lodgings, and he gets Cardano his first stable job. So the city of Milan had this thing called the Piatti Foundation. So this now his father had a position at this Piatti Foundation again, and I don't know why they wouldn't have offered it to Cardano, but so this was Milan didn't have a university. Like these universities they had, nope, they they were like ancient. They're from like, the 1200s, hundreds of years old, in Pavia and Bologna and all this. Milan didn't have one. So at the turn of the century, they started up something called the Piatti Foundation, named after the founder, and it was like public lectures. And Cardano got the Piatti lectureship on geometry, logic, Greek, and astronomy. And so basically they gave a public open lecture on any holiday, which they had a ton of holidays back then. So it was like 2 lectures a week. And it was year round. So Cardano would just have to give 2 public lectures a week, year round, on his favorite subjects. So finally he's got a position and a standing, right?
Ah,
So Arquento came through, and this is kind of Cardano's wife. A few weeks after that magician did his his spell-breaking pawn dunking ritual,
yeah, the moon, and it got absorbed into the moon.
Yeah, according to Cardano.
That's a great story. I love
Yeah,
that.
I wanna get to the good ones, but we'll see here.
Yeah, this is great. This is great stuff.
Yeah,
I am loving hearing this guy's life story.
I know, and it's gonna get crazier and better.
I can't believe it.
Okay, so he's thinking Arquento got him this position. Like, Arquento was the one that pulled the strings for the Piatti Foundation, position. And he's thinking, "Okay, now I'm a recognized Milanese Piatti lecturer. I got a wife and a child. I'll try again for the College of Physicians. This time they surely won't deny me." Denied a third time. Cannot practice medicine.
I wonder
Yep.
if he rubs people the wrong way.
I
Not
think
that
yeah,
bad guy, but if he's one of those people that just, like, people always feel like, "Ah, we just don't wanna deal with him."
there's that, but then he makes friends,
Yeah.
close friends a lot too, so
Yep.
he may be someone that, like, if he likes you, you'll get along with him. If he doesn't,
Yeah.
you may not. And I
Yeah.
think this illegitimacy thing just had
Oh,
a bigger sway at the time than we would really understand,
yeah.
like
I keep
yeah,
I keep forgetting about that, is that's
yeah.
so heavy.
It was a huge problem
So real.
for that line of work. We're eventually gonna get to this him treating the Archbishop of Scotland, who's illegitimate, the Archbishop of Scotland. Like, and I believe there are some popes that may have been or something like that too, so
Okay.
I don't know why doctor, but I guess a doctor had to be a very reputable, upstanding, non-threatening person at the time. I'm not entirely sure, but it wasn't a
Okay.
Okay, so the one thing that Cardano, so he's got the lectureship and now he can start publishing too. So he publishes in 1534 his first astrological work, kind of a not so erudite prognostication pamphlet, Prognostico. But he labels himself as a Milanese physician. I think he's trying, like he's not able to practice, but he is a physician in Milan. And astrology and medicine were so closely connected at the time. If you can make your name in astrology, maybe they'll let you in for medicine. And but then he published that before they denied him. That didn't work. So he gets in touch with an old friend he had from the University of Pavia who had inherited a printing press. And this guy was his fellow student with Cardano, who had always looked up to Cardano, had borrowed Cardano's notes. He thought Cardano's genius. So he's like, I could publish your first book, first medical book. Let me do it. He said, I'll take on the expense. You don't have to pay me anything. I'll pay you if it works out. So Cardano gives him a manuscript he had worked on called On the Differing Positions of Physicians. And he'll write, works like this again, kind of like examining the study of medicine. Are we right here? Where are our errors? This sort of thing.
Oh, I thought it was gonna be a medical sexual,
No, no. It's more like looking at the practices of doctors and like,
yeah.
does this make sense what we're doing? Are there contradictions here? Do we make mistakes? Are we obviously doing some things wrong? Well, this guy, to publish it, he changes the title to On the Bad Practice of Medicine. So, so at this point, Cardano's, I think his strategy is, okay, I cannot win by being nice. How about I like jab them? See if they start respecting me if I start making a name for myself in the press and start jabbing at them. So basically, he publishes this work that, scandalizes the medical profession. And, of course, the College of Physicians is furious with him with publishing this thing that's airing out all their problems, making people trust doctors less, right?
Oh.
So, but at this point, like Cardano's like, well, they're not going to let me practice anyway, so why not give it a try? And so he had been still practicing medicine illegally. But here's another thing. Arquinto starts Arquinto's a guy with connections. There's a Augustinian monastery that's in Milan or close to Milan. And Arquinto's like, well, the College of Physician has no jurisdiction over the monastery. They have their own right, their own doctors. So he gets Cardano the position of the physician for the Augustinian monastery. And there's an interesting story there. It kind of shows Cardano's medical practice. So the head friar of the monastery, he had some sort of a skin disease that would not cure up. So Cardano goes and he basically brings this guy into remission from his skin troubles from very simple things like diet, sleep, exercise, and this tact of like people often when they were sick, they thought, I have sinned. I have to fast more. I have to pray at night. I have to, like abstain from washing. And Cardano's more like, you got to stop the fasting. You need to eat. You need to make sure to get your sleep. You have to wash yourself. Like these kind of things and like take it easy on yourself. Like
Yeah.
simple things, but like people didn't have that idea in their head. This is one of I think Cardano's medical advances is making careful case studies. Don't like see the problem and consult a textbook. Watch the person make notes. Watch them over time. When is it worse? When is it better? What did they eat? What was their stool like? This sort of thing.
Like, really bringing the empirical method into the
And then trusting his intuition, like, and you gotta think also, he's a math guy, a probability guy. He sees patterns. He's like, I bet you there's something there. There's something in what he's eating or whatever it is. So, and he's like, and not afraid to use intuition, probably hearing from the guardian spirit that's in his ear sometimes.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, exactly. Like, he's not a guy that's afraid to like, hey, let's try this. Like Galen didn't mention it, Hippocrates didn't mention it, but let's just give it a try. What's the harm of changing his diet up? That sort of thing.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. So anyway, so he gets that position. Now, let's stop there. Now we're going to go to Cardano's rival, Tartaglia.
Okay.
And we'll meet them up when they get to their rivalry. So Tartaglia is about the same age as Cardano, born 1550. he's basically from this Venetian town, Brescia. And I guess for one thing they have to notice in the wars of the time, France had conquered a lot of like the western edge of Venice, and Brescia was a town that they had conquered and sometimes lost and this sort of thing. So Tartaglia's father was named was like one of these childs who he was so poor he was an abandoned child that was found by nuns, right?
Okay.
And he was brought in and he was brought into a nunnery and raised. This is the father, Michel, and he he's tiny, so they call him Micheletto or something, like the little Michel, right? And he ends up like being a very good worker, and he gets positioned at some sort of a nobleman's house, and he gets put in charge of the stables. And they say by some miraculous way, he eventually got to own his own horse, which was not common for, a common person. And because he's a small guy, he becomes such a great rider for long distances. He becomes a postman for like a certain area in northern Italy, delivering letters for people. So that's his father. Tartaglia is born to him, but when Tartaglia, so it's Niccolo Tartaglia, and actually Tartaglia is not his last name. We'll see why he has it. It's one of these Latinized names that he takes on. But so young Niccolo is 6 years old. His father gets stopped by some French troops that are trying to intercept letters, and they don't find anything on him, but they kill him. So
Ah,
the father dies when he's 6 years old. The family has no money. And so if he had any education at all, it stops right there. He probably did not. Tartaglia has zero education, 6 years old, nothing. Another 6 years in complete poverty, and there's this famous siege. So Brescia had kind of thrown out the French garrison. Like I think it was like the Mason, some guilds of like working men threw out the garrison of French troops that were in Brescia, and the army comes back in terrible force, and it's this slaughter called the Sack of Brescia. 10,000 people die in like a number of days in a town that's, I'm guessing, like 50,000 or something. Like a huge number of people die in Brescia. And so Tartaglia is 12 years old at this time. Him and his mother take refuge in a cathedral, but they don't respect sanctuary. The cathedral is raided, and Tartaglia, this 12-year-old, gets smashed across the face with a saber. So it's a huge gash, and he knocks out most of his teeth. And the mother, and there's no medicine around, the mother has to like care for him by like putting saliva into his wound and just like care for him. And I don't know if his siblings died. I'd have to check on that, but I think they might have. But he does survive. But he's got a giant scar on his face, and he can't talk well for the rest of his life, and he stammers. Tartaglia is Italian for the stammerer. So he takes he takes on that he takes it on for himself, right?
wow.
So he survives, but he's got tremendous ambition, though he's got no education. So the next great story in his life, when he's 15 years old, I think he convinces a local tutor to give him, I think, like 2 weeks of education, 15 days, something like that.
Okay.
So he's 14, 15 years old at the time. He can't read.
Yeah.
So he's being tutored in this, and I think like a number of days into it, like 5 days in or something, the tutor realizes, I'm not gonna get paid for this. I gave this on credit, right? Like, I didn't get paid up front. So he kicks Tartaglia out. It's like, "That's you guys can't pay for this." Tartaglia says later, "I got from letters A to K." That's where his education ended, at K. But he on the way out, he stole the teacher's notes. So so
Oh,
he start
yeah.
so he starts teaching himself, right? And he practices as much as he can, and he kind of gives himself the basics of literacy and numeracy, right? And his mother is still watching out for him. He knows of his ambitions. So she finds this nobleman who's willing to sponsor him because he's intelligent. So he goes to study, I believe, at Padua, but he's not a regular university student. He kind of just lives there, accesses the library, and I think gets some tutoring mentorship from some of the scholars there. He never gets a degree, but he's gifted at mathematics, and he gets the elements of Latin, though he's never, I don't know if he's never the greatest Latinist. And actually, we'll come back to Tartaglia. He's the third case and measures words.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Come later. But um So he's really good at mathematics, though. So he sets up in Venice as the head of an abacus school, which I found out is not actually, they didn't actually teach abacuses. They taught
Okay.
calculation. It was like a basics mathematics school that you would send a child to for a year, teenagers, whatever, if you were going to be the son of a merchant or maybe a tradesman, someone who needed to know geometry and calculation. And this was his skill because he was, somewhat, um, gifted in higher mathematics, geometry, algebra stuff, but he was like day in, day out drilling students in calculation. Like, like and also too working on a lot of practical problems. A lot of stuff had to do with like how to share profit sharing arrangements or
Mhm.
currency conversions, or also too for like ballistics problems or geometry for building stuff like that. And he would
Yeah.
go to the armory in Venice, and he would charge a penny per problem, he said. So they would ask him questions and he'd work them out for them, like
Oh,
but
wow.
so he was constantly, but in physical mathematics and commercial mathematics. And okay, so here's the thing, he kind of makes a name for himself in that. And at the time, they have this practice of mathematical duels, challenges, contests. And a guy comes to town, a university educated mathematician who wasn't too great. His name was Antonio Fiore. But his trick was he had a teacher named Scipio Ferraris. And this guy had discovered a certain solution to cubic equations. So I guess this was kind of the cutting edge of algebra at the time. A cubic equation in our notation would be like x to the third power plus like mx equals c or something. You get the idea. There's a cube in it, and it's difficult. And you have to remember at the time they didn't have the notation we have. Lots of these are written in words, and they
Oh,
didn't have.
yeah.
I was thinking x, and for them apparently at the time they called it cosa, which meant thing, the thing we're looking for. And so it's said to, when John Dee talks about the Cossack art, he means the art pertaining to cosa, the thing. And then it was, it's a century later before they get easier to work with, notation. Yeah. So he comes into town and he challenges Tartaglia to a mathematical contest. They're going to swap, and this was the regular thing, they're going to swap 30 problems or something like this. They both have like 30 days to work on them. They send in their answers to a panel, and then the winner is announced. You get the one guy's humiliated, the other guy gets a claim.
That's
And
so cool.
the prize for this was the loser has to pay for 30 dinners at a tavern for the winner. 30 dinners. So it's an expense, right?
Yeah.
But Fiore thinks I've got a card up my sleeve. Nobody has Farais's solution to cubic equations. I'm going to give him a lot of cubic equations. Like he won't have a solution for it. Tartaglia doesn't have a solution for it, although he's fairly competent in algebra. He doesn't. So, and Tartaglia gives him a mix of problems, geometry, like things that he's good at.
Uh-huh.
So he's stressed because this will badly hurt his reputation if he doesn't win. He runs his own school. He's not a university professor. Even it would be bad enough if he was in, but he's just paying clients, down at the artillery. And I think he tutors to higher class Phoenicians. Like
Okay.
these people who I want to know about Euclid. I want to know, he'll teach them too, right? So he's got like, a diverse income stream of, people who hire him for mathematical things.
Right.
So he stresses, he stresses, he stresses. I think it's like 8 days before the answers are due. He figures it out. He figures out on his own Ferraris's equation. And I think he even goes beyond Ferraris's equation.
Oh,
He's like, wait a second, and he figures it out, and he figures out more. So and he says, once I had that insight of how to do it, I think he figures it out. Like they thought of these cube problems in terms of like geometry. Like, they thought of it as a square, that kind of thing.
mm,
And so he says, I solved the problems in 2 hours. Done. All 30. He shows up. I guess this wasn't in person. This was a mail-in type thing, right? You write down your answers and submit them. He solved every one of Fiore's problems perfectly. I think Fiore solved none of his problems. Something. He's humiliated because he wasn't the greatest mathematician. He was kind of like, I have one trick up my sleeve, and that was it.
oh, that was his trick.
And,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
Tartaglia was this hard-headed, working class mathematician who's like, I'm going to give him like 30 separate, most difficult, obscure problems I can think of that I know
Yeah.
the answer to, right?
Yeah.
Not that you couldn't know the answer to this, but it would take you a lot to figure out the answer for
I
one.
see.
And I think Fiore kind of gave up partway through
So
it.
he just destroyed Fiore.
Yes, and okay, now his renown is great. This guy, university mathematician, student of Scipio Ferraris, comes in, challenges him. Not one answer. This working class mathematician, Tartaglia, destroys him, and in his head, he solves this hidden. Nobody knows Ferraris's. Only some students of Ferraris knew this.
Yeah.
This cubic equation. Okay, so his renown is up. Great. So let's go back to Cardano now. This is Cardano's 1530s. He's starting to work on his mathematics book. He's going to write one on arithmetic and mensuration first. That's coming out in 1539. So mensuration being measurement. This is an insert, like how do we measure distances, all this kind of stuff. So at the time, Cardano, he is starting to write more. He's got these, paid positions. From the servants in his house, there's a 14-year-old boy who comes to his house named Ludovico Ferrari. And he's going to be a servant in Cardano's house. I think it was one of Cardano's cousins or something that was there before him, and he just left. He didn't want to do the work. So he hires Ferrari, and Ferrari's like a good little worker. And Cardano knows he's pretty smart. So he's like, you know what? I'm going to just train Ferrari to be my secretary. So because Cardano has terrible, like we said, terrible manuscripts, writing as
Right.
fast as he can. And then, another thing too, like remember when he published that on the bad practice of medicine?
Yeah.
The college hit Cardano back hard because it was published so badly. So many printing errors, mistakes,
Oh,
and because that was that guy's first publication with his newly inherited print thing.
press.
And this is one of Cardano, and he's trying to, be a printer for Cardano's sloppy manuscripts. It came out as they're like, "Oh, you're criticizing us. Look at your book. It's terrible." So that's the thing. So this is a role that Ferrari comes to. He writes out Cardano's manuscripts in fair hand, removes the mistakes. Cardano can write as fast as he wants. Ferrari can get them ready for publication.
Yeah.
But he also starts training Ferrari in mathematics. He's like, "You're also going to be my mathematical apprentice." And I think he uses Ferrari's like, "I got this new book on teaching arithmetic and mensuration. I'll just practice on you. Does it work for you?" So he uses him as the guinea pig for this.
Yeah.
So they publish that. And they start working on their next book that's going to be on algebra. This is going to be Cardano's breakthrough work. This is going to be the Ars Magna. If everything lost, he'd be remembered for that book. So a school teacher from Brescia had come um, to Milan and was mentioning, "Did you hear about Tartaglia? He's got a solution for cubic equations." And they're like, "No, we hadn't, but we do need that for our book." So they write to Tartaglia. And I should say Tartaglia too at this time. He writes this new book called A New Science of Artillery. And it's interesting. So Tartaglia, you have to imagine him as a very severe, like this guy who stammered, grew a huge beard out to, oh, actually I have a picture of
Oh,
him.
yeah. Scar.
Yeah, to cover his scar.
This is too. I can't believe I only have 18 minutes. We are gonna
I
have
know.
to.
I can finish the story and then we'll come back to another one
But
next.
I don't want you to speed them up because I'll come back
No,
tomorrow to record the rest if necessary.
um, I think I can finish this one in 18 minutes. This is about what it will take.
Okay, just don't
Yeah.
speed it up because of this. It's okay.
Yeah. Okay, so here's Tartaglia, and you've got to imagine the
Uh,
stammerer, the working class person who made it on its own, and he is like not a friendly guy. Like a harsh calculation teacher, suspicious of everybody, brilliant, but he had to make it on his own, didn't trust anyone, probably resentful, that sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
So but the interesting thing, he writes this new science of artillery that's mathematics for artillery. And he didn't wanna publish it because he didn't like war, and he especially didn't like Christians killing Christians.
Mm.
But because he's kind of a pacifist, which shocked me for him. You'd think he'd be like a militarist, but he's not.
Yeah.
So as we said, Italy is under threat from the Ottomans at the time. He's like, "For that, because I don't want Italy to be dominated by the Muslim empire, I'll publish this." He does. And so there's a link to Galileo here, a lineage, because Tartaglia is one of the first ones who starts applying geometry to the trajectories of cannonballs, missiles, that sort of
Yeah.
thing. And one of Tartaglia's students, decades and decades later, become one of Galileo's mathematics teachers. So there's a lineage there from Tartaglia to Galileo, right?
Yes.
So Cardano writes to him and he's like, I would really love to talk to you. Tartaglia's in Venice, he's in Milan. And, but Tartaglia is suspicious of him, doesn't really want to go, doesn't want to give up. He wants his solution to be put in his own book, not in Cardano's book. But
Yeah.
Cardano's like, I could open up, we can work together. I can open up some avenues for him. So at the time, Milan, Cardano is friends with the governor of Milan. I think I have a picture of, here's Ludovico Ferrari, the student that Cardano trains. This is a little later in life, but there's an image. And Milan is being governed by Alfonso de Avalos. He rules Milan for the Spanish Empire, and he is fascinating. So he's friends with Cardano, but he's in Titian's circle. This is a Titian portrait, and he's also he's the main patron of Ariosto, the author of Orlando Furioso. Avalos, I think, is mentioned in that poem. He's also the patron who gets Giulio Camillo, the guy who made that wooden memory theater. He brings him to Milan for the final year of his life if you'll teach me about your wooden memory theater. So he's got this fascinating intellectual circle, right, with Titian, Camillo, Cardano, this sort of thing. And so Cardano says, I'm good friends with Alfonso de Avalos, and I've given him, he's a military leader, I've given him your new science of artillery book. So, so now Tartaglia's in a rough position because he's like, I can't anger Davalos, like by saying, no, I don't want to meet him. I have to go. I probably could have brushed off Cardano alone, but I have to go for Davalos. So he travels there. And of course, when he gets to Milan and Cardano, Davalos isn't even in town. He can't meet him. But Cardano's like, oh, don't worry about it. We'll meet him later. Come stay with us, Like, I don't think Cardano has any bad plans for this guy. He just wants his book of algebra to be complete. And he is now the more, connected scholar. He can help Tartaglia, but Tartaglia is very suspicious and prideful of his own work. So what he does, he wasn't going to say anything, but he relents. So Tartaglia had written a poem that encrypted in it the cubic equation solution.
Amazing.
If you could decipher so he did it as a mnemonic for himself, so he wouldn't forget it, but also an encryption device so that if anyone found it, they couldn't easily figure it out. So he says, so if I'm not going to tell you, but I'll give you my poem. As soon as he gets back to town, he's like, I should not have given that poem, right? So I don't quite understand the total mathematics of here. Either Cardano deciphers that poem, Tartaglia thinks he cannot, or him and Ferrari actually figure out the solution. He has the cubic solution, though, but he's already promised Tartaglia that he won't publish. That was one of the conditions.
We don't have access to that poem, right? We just have
No, I think we
stories.
do. I think we do. That's what
We actually talk about that now, but I mean, sometime I have to see what that looks like.
That's what that chapter of measured words is about. Number in poem,
Okay.
So one of the conditions for giving the poem was that Cardano's like, I'll just know it for myself. I won't publish it. He's sworn by that, right? Now I think he's either deciphered the poem or him and Ferrari have figured out for themselves, but now they're stuck. We need this in our book, but we've already sworn to Tartaglia that we won't publish it. But they come in luck. That guy Scipio Ferreira, the originator of that Fiore secret, was dead, but they found out his son-in-law in Bologna had all his papers. So Cardano and Ferrari go down to Bologna and they say, can we look at the papers? The guy's happy to show Farius's papers, and they have the original solution in there. Now Cardano feels, I'm out of the oath. I'm not publishing the one you discovered. I'm publishing Ferreris. But he goes out of his way to, and I don't think it was quite the same thing, but he goes out of his way to credit, we're publishing this Scipio Farius's solution, but Tartaglia also came up with a brilliant solution that he'll reveal in his book. Like they're really good.
They're
we
very
love to
generous.
generous, but Tartaglia is incensed. Like he's like, and he starts publishing from Venice that you have this was going to be the pride of my work. You've stolen my work. Cardano, and also too, so he starts ripping apart uh Card Cardano's arithmetic book. Oh, Cardano's not such a great look at these here. I have to think any book that was published at the time, you could find 100 errors in it. It was just a
Yeah.
common thing that could be done. People made mistakes. They didn't really understand their areas that well, right?
Uh-huh.
So now he's really damaging Cardano's reputation. And Cardano feels, I've been totally fair with you. This is 15, this groundbreaking new work is out in the market. Uh the Ars Magna, it's revolutionizing algebra. And now we should say Ludovico Ferrari actually surpassed the cubic equation. He was the first one, and he surpassed Cardano in this. He starts to do quartic equations,
Mm.
x to the fourth power. So he comes up with the first person that, and people before this had thought that these weren't problems that could have a formula. You just have to try and try and try until you found an answer that worked for them. So
Wow.
Ferrari jumps ahead of the master and finds the quartic solution, which is in Ars Magna. So Tartaglia is writing these terrible things about Cardano. It's really pissing off Ferrari, the student. So in this day and era, what do you do when you have such a dispute as this? You need a pamphlet war. So they start a
Oh,
pamphlet war, a mathematical pamphlet war. So there's going to be 12 pamphlets, cartellis, that they're going to send back and forth to each other, and each one's going to have mathematical problems in it. Ferrari to Tartaglia. And each side prints their own. They have their own printed, and they send it out across Europe and Italy to 50 famous scholars. So everyone's watching who's going to win, Tartaglia or Cardano's student Ferrari. And they go back and forth over 2 years. I think it's 1546 to 48. So I believe there's 12 pamphlets, and they resolve to meet in person for a debate. Who solved the problems the best, right? They hadn't.
Oh,
So Tartaglia travels to Milan, and he's meeting for the debate. Now you got to remember, he's going into the home territory of Cardano. Ferrari has tons of friends and, associations with the university and all this kind of stuff. Tartaglia's the outsider. He's a stammerer. He's not an eloquent public speaker to the extent that Ferrari is. And so they have this debate on the first day. Tartaglia is losing badly. In terms of algebra, maybe Tartaglia's specialty is like basic mathematics, geometry, this sort of thing. Ferrari's become an advanced mathematician, and especially in algebra, he can destroy Tartaglia in these fields. And I think several times throughout the day, the judges have to say to Tartaglia, look, let's keep this gentlemanly. You're losing your cool. You're shouting.
yeah.
You're being uncouth in this debate. So Tartaglia just leaves that night, just leaves the town. Doesn't come back for the second day. Humiliated. And he lost the debate. So it was a huge blow on his life. But
Oh,
he doesn't stop though. So that's 1548. He lives to 1556, but I do believe he experiences some poverty and depression in this last era. But he's known for two famous works, and one's really interesting. So I just prior to that debate, I think 1546, he publishes the first vernacular translation of Euclid's Elements in Europe. Before that, you could get it in the original Greek, you could get it in Latin. No common person could get it in their own language you could read. So if you weren't trained in the classical languages, you could not read Euclid. So
mm,
Tartaglia taught himself enough Latin to translate it into Italian from Latin. And so that's 1546. This work is going to be very influential on the Henry Billingsley translation from 1570, the one that Dee writes his mathematical preface for, his
ah,
substantial mathematical. And there's the same idea there. We need to get geometry, the study of geometry, into the hands of the common people, carpenters, engineers, military people, because this is going to advance the economy. This is Dee's philosophy, right? They can if this can get into their language, we can really get some benefit rather than just being stuck at the university.
right.
And they definitely they're inspired by Tartaglia's translation, because they even make the same mistake on the title page. They call it Euclid of Megara. which was a different Euclid. It was Tartaglia's mistake, but they copied it. It's Euclid of Alexandria who was
Okay.
the geometrician, but it shows how closely they copied it. They even made the same mistake on, and I'd wonder what Euclid of Megara on the John Dee Billingsley translation, but they had copied it from Tartaglia's version about 30 years earlier.
Right.
And then he finally does, near the end of his life, he publishes most of his general treatise on mathematics, and some say it's one of the best works of mathematics in Renaissance, written in vernacular language, going through, geometry, algebra, calculation, and especially on practical mathematics, all those complicated commercial mathematics, like maybe the kind of things that you think of an economist working on today, like applied mathematics. Tartaglia was a master in that, and it really advanced the study of mathematics in that respect.
Yeah.
And that people learned from his vernacular, practical, it wasn't necessarily a cutting edge book on algebra, but it gave you everything you needed to advance commercial and industrial life, let's say.
Right. Right.
So I think that's actually that brings the story of Tartaglia and Cardano to an end. Tartaglia dies in 1556. So I think that's a good spot too, because my head's getting overwhelmed and my throat's getting sore. But
Okay.
this brings back Cardano and medicine.
Uh-huh.
That's what I think our next focus should be. And this is going to bring us to Cardano publishing a great work on medicine and then being called to Scotland and traveling to the court, in the English court of Edward VI. Me and
Okay.
John Dee meeting great French scholars like that. That could be maybe our
Great.
next talk. Yep.
That sounds awesome. This
Yep.
was fascinating. I love this. Thank you
Yeah.
for sharing it all.
Yeah. Thanks so much. And thanks for everyone listening.
Yep. See you next time.
Okay. We'll talk to you later.
Bye.